Hello and welcome to the main event. My name is Meeta Sahni and I'm welcoming our guest today, Alaina Mutti. Hi, Alaina.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
It's a pleasure to have you back. So for everyone, while you're jumping in the room and you're finding your way around this webinar, there'll be some, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. There'll be some who've already heard this, so please forgive me for repeating myself. But before Alaina and I jump deep into our topic today, just wanted to let you know that our sessions run for about 30 to 40 minutes. We very much believe that your time is precious, and not ironically, we've got a section on how to manage your time and avoid burnout. So we want to be succinct and give you great tools that you can take away and put to use straight away. We have a chat box on the right. We feel it's really important that you have a voice in these sessions. And as a result, we make it interactive, and this is how easy it is. You just literally type your comments in the chat box here on the right. And that could be a question, it could be a comment, it could even be a reaction to what we're saying. So please feel free to interact and let us know your thoughts. We also like to have some interaction on an understanding of who's in the room and what challenges you face. So we like to have a poll on the go. And the poll today is asking, does having a good or bad day at work impact your overall mental health and well-being? And I've been a little bit, sort of obtuse about it with a yes and no option. We know that nothing is black or white; it's usually grey. But in some ways, we tend to make habits out of our responses. So yes is the first option. I take my worries home with me. No is the next option. I let it all go at the end of the day. And then we have a most of the time and some of the time. So at the moment, it's split equally between yes, most of the time, and some of the time. So let's see how that poll moves along during our session. But that gives me an opportunity now to come over to our guest, Alaina. Alaina, welcome. And thank you for being part of the final Mental Health Week. We've run the whole month of May as Mental Health Awareness Month. And this is our last week.
This is our last week, yes, to wrap it all up with.
And tell me why, because we discussed this topic before, didn't we? We discussed having something to do with understanding communication and how we look at the employers and employees and what might be going on for each of them in terms of communication.
Yeah.
And why do you think that's an important topic?
I think, well, I mean, obviously the whole mental health is becoming a lot more spoken about now anyway, in work world and personal life as well. But I think knowing how to have the balance between both of them is so imperative. And that's why having training sessions like this, talks like this, anything like it, where there's just an open discussion and tips on how people can manage it and what they can do to better themselves and their lives, and then their colleagues, for example, people around them, is a benefit to everyone.
Yeah, very much so. So much of misunderstanding and challenges in the workplace come from unintentional behavior and unintentional outcomes. We all go to work. I don't think anybody goes to work thinking, I want to make that a bad day for someone, right? I mean, it's just not the way we're wired. But we do go to work with a whole baggage essentially, a whole story of what's happened before we step foot into that workplace. And I know now work is not just a geographical place, but it's a mindset. It's when we put ourselves in front of the computer. It's when we step into the office. For some, they're already working on the train, and sometimes that journey can be challenging. So a lot of what we're talking about today really is about almost putting ourselves to get that empowerment. It's also to facilitate empowerment.
Yeah.
And it's getting everyone sort of vibrating at that higher level, if you like, which is easier said than done, because many people don't even realize what's going on, what kind of challenges they're creating, or what kind of vibes they're communicating out.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously that kind of leads to something I was talking to you earlier about, with how I know people who have all of their different challenges, both outside of work and in work. And then that kind of leads us on anyway to the first sort of question of having those difficult conversations with your colleague or your boss, and how to really go about it, because there are certain things, like I was saying to you before, if you're not feeling recognized, that technically obviously like has an effect on how you're feeling, how you approach your day, because you immediately go into your day thinking, I'm not appreciated here, I'm in a bad mood. And that has a knock-on effect for the rest of your work, and also just your attitude to the people around you as well.
So having difficult conversations with your colleague or boss is our first topic. We're going to cover 4 areas today. The first being how to have difficult conversations. The second then is how to manage your mental well-being at work. The third is how to push back in a polite and constructive way, which will be an interesting one. And then the final one is how to manage your time at work to avoid burnout. So I'm actually a big believer that all of these are built around communication. I believe that they also come from a place of knowing that we have a choice. And as soon as we realize that we have a choice in any situation that we're in, it's hopefully opens up our mindset to thinking about solutions rather than feeling beaten down by a situation. So, Alaina, in our warm-up for today's session, we were talking about, you said that you've got real life scenarios. So tell me about a scenario around difficult conversations that you think would be worth unpicking.
Well, I think it stems from the whole not being recognized, and therefore having to have a conversation about whether it's being paid for what you feel like you're more worthy of and more deserving of, if you're putting all the hours in and you're not getting recognized for that, or if there's a promotion. I had someone recently, she has been promised a promotion for like just each month. They just keep saying, next month. And to the point where now she's ready to go and leave. And so I think it's having those times where you want to be a bit more forceful about something and have that conversation with your boss or your manager or whoever it is. But it's nerve-wracking to sit down face to face in a room with someone, and not everyone, we're not taught how to communicate properly to people and like share your feelings also in a professional way and do those. You
hit on the word there, feelings, and we are obviously, as human beings, we are built on emotion and feeling, and yet when we go to work, we much more work within facts. And I think that trying to instigate a difficult conversation might actually be difficult for you because that's how you feel. But the fact is that for you to be able to go and ask for your review that you were promised many, many moons ago on a number of occasions isn't an unreasonable request. So let's work on facts and let's get some perspective on any situation before we start to make assumptions about how that conversation is going to be received. So I almost have this, if I know that I'm going to approach, or the way I recommend approaching a conversation is prep. So literally write down what, first of all, visualize the conversation, and almost when you visualize it and you think about it, you're going to imagine the worst case scenario. So run through the worst case scenario in your mind, but then sit with okay, so I'm going to approach, we're talking about asking for a pay rise, or at least asking for the review that you were promised. So let's think about who's in the ring, if you like, but you're not actually opponents in this ring. You are two people on the same journey of helping this organization be more successful. So if you are able to bring to life to your manager or your boss that, this review will actually be able to facilitate more headspace and more presence for me, and therefore allow me to do a better job, your manager might actually think, I want to get this done sooner. So I'm a big believer in what I call point of view. Think about your audience, think about the person on the other side, and think about what brought them to that point. What kind of meetings will they have had before? What kind of day have they had? What kind of, scenario is going to play out for them after the session they have with you? And therefore, when you suggest a time to talk, make it something that is going to be suitable for them. So I noticed that, Fridays at 4 seem to be a time when you have a little bit more space. I didn't want to make an assumption, but would that be a good time for us to talk? Talk about what? Well, you mentioned that you would like to give me a review, and in order for us to continue to grow and work together with success, having that time to reflect with you would be really useful to ensure that my headspace is clear and we can push forward on working together as we have been, and even better. And it is difficult because you don't want to come across as pushy, but you do want to come across as assertive and confident and within your rights. And we talk a lot about tone, and we talk a lot about language. And actually, when you're communicating, you communicate with your body language, with your eyes, you communicate with your tone and how you word things. And actually, the actual physical words count for something like 7% of how you communicate. Tone, I think, is about 35, 38%, and body language is 60, 65% plus. So approaching a difficult conversation, I would say, should never be done on an email, because your audience, I think email's great for confirming facts, agreeing to something that you've already discussed, as we agreed, blah, blah, blah. But really think about, suggesting a time that if it's going to be a difficult conversation for them, make sure it's an easy time and an easy and a good approach. You want to say something forceful, but you can say it with softer tone and with a partnership body language rather than an overbearing one. So there's many different ways of getting your point across without necessarily getting your manager or your colleagues back up. I think the other thing is always, if you do have a difficult conversation to have, is go along with proof. Facts, not feelings. Turn up with, this happened, that happened. This is when we discussed this. This is when we agreed that. Yeah. Because ultimately, people can't feel what you feel, but facts are there in black and white. You can back that up by then saying, that made me feel like this. Yeah. You're actually dealing with definitives, which again dispels the kind of subjectivity that can be created in a difficult conversation. People feeling defensive, people feeling now's not the time. It hopefully, by planning it ahead and by it being very factual, you can eliminate some of the grays that can make that a difficult conversation to have.
And I think also it's about really being honest with everything that you are wanting to achieve from that conversation, because I know a lot of the time, and I don't know if that just also comes from experience as well, like you might just have to go through a few jobs or interview processes or whatever to know it. Yeah. But I know from the past, again, I had like an old colleague who would always get really, really worried about having a chat with our manager, because she'd either, replay a scenario that just wasn't going to happen in her head, or she would try and form, not necessarily a lie, but she would hedge around what she was getting to, I think to try soften it. Yeah. But then would end up frustrated after, because not everything
to get it across.
Yeah. And so then you're still a bit frustrated. And I definitely would always say to us, like, just say everything and get it all out there and then come up with the solution together. Yeah. Like you said, it's not, separate. You're both on the same team, same journey, and trying to get the same outcome is to basically be successful. So
and without a doubt, there is going to be a differential of power in the majority of work relationships. It's either going to be a manager trying to start a difficult conversation with an employee, or an employee trying to start a difficult conversation with a manager. Mm-hmm. Actually, you have to take equal care, whether it's up, down, or an equal colleague, because how people perceive your approach will probably dictate how open they are to coming to a solution together. So I would say it's all in the prep. And I think a smart way of getting out what you want to say is write it down. So the prep again, the fact, but also speak it. Get in front of a mirror and say the words you want to say. Because if you've never said those words, your mouth doesn't even have the muscle memory to be able to repeat. So one, it's hard mentally. If it's then hard physically, chances are you're going to refrain from wanting to get that out. But if you've practiced, then the words will flow. Yeah. And it sounds silly and it sounds really obvious, but don't underestimate the power of preparation.
Yeah. Fail to prepare, prepare to fail.
Exactly. And then I would also say, be open to your manager or whoever, you're having this difficult conversation with, not necessarily being ready to answer you there and then. They may want to reflect on it and listen to the language very carefully. Again, because sometimes we walk in determined to get an outcome and we don't hear the word yes, we automatically assume it's a no. But actually it could be a let me think about it. And then it's okay to say, of course, we want to get to an end point. When would be a good time to revisit this? So you don't leave it open-ended, but you get another point at which you can discuss. Yeah. And that way you start the conversation, you start the process of having a difficult conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And then that obviously helps you just feel more reassured.
I think one of the things I think is really important to remember is that we make a choice to be at work every day. I know sometimes, once you're in the rhythm and you're getting on your train and you're having good days or challenging days, or after a period of, I remember speaking to somebody who said, I've got a boss that doesn't see me, chucks everything at me, and frankly, I don't know what I'm doing here. And I said, well, then you have a choice. You can leave. You can go and look for another job. And she said, yes, but I like the company. I like the rewards. I like my colleagues. I like this. I like that. And it was so empowering for this person to walk through that journey of why am I here? Why do I put up with the things I don't like? Well, because all of the things I like outweigh the things that I don't like. And that, I've made this choice. Then you realize you are empowered to make that choice. So sometimes you are in a situation or an environment that has some challenging aspects. Don't let the challenging aspects mar the whole of your experience. Let's get those aspects into perspective and remember there are solutions to overcoming them. And if you try and overcome and it doesn't work, or that small element becomes, it overshadows everything else, well, then you also have a choice, which is that you can walk with your feet and talk with your feet. And, in the main group, we are all about retention and development, but there is also cultural and behavioral alignment. So it really is for you as an individual to be able to step back and reflect on the whole thing before you make a decision about one person or one scenario.
Yeah. The build up
towards
it.
Exactly. So I suppose this would lead us on to talking about mental health. So let's have a little look at the poll and see what the feedback has been. Okay. So the question asking, does having a good or bad day at work impact your overall mental health? A third of our audience are saying that yes, and that they take their worries home with them. 50% say sometimes, and 16% say most of the time. So essentially half are sometimes, depending on the scenario, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. You've got some self-regulating tools that you have in place. And of the other 50%, 2/3 say yes, they take their worries home, or yes, most of the time. So it's really split halfway, isn't it, Alaina? Yeah. And that's interesting because, again, you spoke about no one necessarily teaches you, business communication, how to have a difficult conversation. You get taught skills and you bring your personality to work, but all of a sudden, there are going to be two types of people. Those that, can actually leave their worries at the door. And I remember thinking, God, I'm so envious of those people because I am somebody that doesn't have natural regulation of work-life balance. Perhaps even if I'm physically, leaving the office, sometimes I can't switch off. And it shows in our poll as well that pretty much is a 50-50 split. And it's tools, some of us, it's a bit like me on my internal quest for better health and better, fat loss. And there are other people that just, look like they've just turned up and that they've got it all. But it's tools that we have in place that we either naturally use or we have to consciously bring into.
Yeah, it's consciously bringing it in, I think. Like, it's always a work in progress, and the effort that you put in to looking after yourself and to creating that work-life balance for you, I think. And again, like you just said, I've never really been someone who can fully leave stuff at the door, because like you said, the self-regulating, that's something I've had to learn how to do almost, you know, and especially over the years. And
I'd love to bring our audience in just while we're talking, and I'd love to ask everyone on the session, can we get some comments about what you do to self-regulate, what you do to decompress from a difficult day at work? That'd be really nice to hear in the chat box what some people do. And Mansi said hi. So hi, Mansi. Thanks for reaching out. Alaina, what do you do?
No, that's what I was saying about what you do to bookend your day almost as well. Like if you know it might be a bad day that's ahead of you, depending on what's going on in your personal life or work life or something, what can you do at the start of it to help you, and what can you do at the end of it to help you too, so that it might just make the middle of it a bit more bearable until you can kind of find a solution to whatever it is that's going on.
Yeah, I think especially with remote working and this working from home and being, you know, some people literally work in their living room, you know, and thankfully we're now in a space where we can either be hybrid. Some people, they want to be at the office all the time. And I personally believe that I know there are many reasons why hybrid is the best way. And actually that at the main group, that's what we do. But I think for mental well-being, having those days when you can differentiate by leaving the office and walking to the train and maybe switching off on the train with a good book or a good podcast or whatever, can actually help people manage their mental health.
Yeah, I definitely think now as well, that was the one positive, let's say, like coming from COVID and everything, was that the work world had to change its view of just the classic 9 till 6 or 9 till 5 that people are doing, and that people are used to. Like you get up, you go, that's your routine, you come home and you sleep and you eat and repeat, like that's all you end up doing. But having that balance and being able to be at home, like we know here, obviously, like you said, at the main group, we have that hybrid world because there are people with families and they get to spend some of that time with their kids at lunchtime, maybe at home, and then go back to work again. And then you feel that bit more of fulfillment, I suppose. Or if you have the time to not have to commute in the morning, then you can have the hour at the gym rather than 45 minutes, rush, shower, go, or something like that, you know. And then that's when, I think you are more fulfilled. You feel lighter, better, happier. You get to fit in parts of your life that mean something to you.
Well, I talk about this triangle in life, and I'm very much about the holistic approach to running one's life, and I hopefully try to lead in a holistic way, which is that actually when somebody has a third of their life in their self-growth and their self-care, a third of their life in their family or loved ones, and a third of their life in their career, then that is a healthy way to balance your world. And it's quite interesting. I'm just looking at the chat box. Thank you for your comments. We've got some really, really interesting approaches here. So Manzi says meeting friends and talking to them. Sometimes I go to my parents' place and talk to them because that makes me a little lighter. And that's wonderful, because straight away you know you've gone to that triangle of loved ones. You know, you've had time at work, and you know it's when you get it a third, and you get that balance, that life really flows. But we all know that's not going to happen in a day, a week, a month. But over a period of time, you can put good practices in place that allow you to balance it out. So Mansi, you're definitely making sure that, you know, to decompress from work, you are then able to spend that time with loved ones. And Umad says, schedule gym work, alone time to detox, and leave the stresses of work to the next day. And that's fantastic, because that is then having the me time as the rebalance. And that is so important. I always thought that life was two halves. It was work, which was my me time, or my family, which was the time I gave to my loved ones. I didn't realize that there was a time when I had to replenish the vessel. So I think, you know, if you think about your mental well-being at work, I think it starts with how much space you create in yourself outside of work. So you've got the capacity to take what's going to happen at work.
Yeah.
We've also got a comment from Inga. Inga says a million things. First of all, to understand that whatever happened at work, it's ended. It's in the past, and it's a past event. That's so powerful, Inga. Yeah, thank you. Sometimes we can ruminate and we let the monkey mind take over, right? Where our thoughts control us instead of us controlling our thoughts. So knowing that it's gone and perhaps doing a reflection exercise rather than a kind of dwelling on it exercise. I always talk about thinking in linear versus circular. I know that my toughest times are when I'm thinking like this, when my thoughts just go round and round. Whereas I think, a really good way of thinking is almost like linear, like where I am and where I want to be, and then try and almost walk through steps and visualize your steps towards the goal. And if something bad happens, what does good look like next time? And then walking towards that space,
Yeah, just change direction.
Yeah, and actually allow your thoughts to be useful and getting you somewhere rather than getting tangled up in them and then lost in them.
Yeah.
Inga also talks about spending time with others, so exercise, talking to someone. Exercise is personal time, mindfulness is personal time, books, watching a film, putting your thoughts in a diary, all wonderful replenishing the vessel actions and activities. Lovely. What an enlightened group we have here.
No, I love it.
Yeah, and actually sometimes it's all things that we know but forgot.
Yeah.
And that's why I think sessions like this are so important. So if you're watching this and we're going to send out recordings to everyone at the end of it, please do feel free to share it with loved ones or anyone that you think might benefit from it as well.
Yeah.
Do we think there's anything else in terms of mental well-being at work? We've spoken a lot about what you do outside of work, but within the workspace, Alaina, what would you say are the important sort of when you're at the office or in work mode? You spoke about, having more time with loved ones or at the gym. What else would you say in terms of mental health at work? When
you're actually at work and that kind of thing. I think, to be honest, this is something also that in a way could tie back to the whole difficult conversations at work, because I think it has to come a bit more from the workplace itself and from, whoever's in charge to be open to allowing things like, because I know people, for example, lunch breaks. So, in the contract it's an hour, but it's kind of secretly frowned upon if you're out for longer than half an hour. And I know so many people who have that, but you need that kind of break at least for 45 minutes to get some fresh air, stretch your legs, refresh, reset, get some food, get your energy back up, doing something like that.
So much more to give, if you go and get that break and everything.
Yeah, just that break just to break up the day. And so I think kind of basically trying to make that a priority in your day, to even just have 5 minutes alone as well. If you're feeling kind of stressed, overwhelmed, just go outside. I think it's one of those things, again, if you're in kind of the earlier stages of your career or something, I think there are a lot of things that you don't feel are okay to do, or you don't feel like you have the right to just put it into place or ask for or something like that. But again, either the more jobs you have or the older you get, I think it's just easier to be a bit more selfish, because you also think, well, if this person is going to push back on me and say, you're not allowed to do this, this, and this, and this, it comes back to what you said, which is, okay, well, I have a choice now to say, do I like being here with someone who does that? Or do I want someone who's going to listen to me and what I need in order to do better here too? Yeah. And, it's give and take in that sense. So I think, at work, it's just knowing how to prioritize yourself. And if you're struggling to do that because you think something is going to be frowned upon, then I think it's just about opening up that dialogue with someone about it, to say, I'm struggling with this, I'm feeling stressed, I please at least need half an hour lunch break, but then another 10-minute break at 3 o'clock to get some fresh air again. Like, it's
I have to say that one of the best things I've seen about the last few years is this personable, not personal and not familiar, but personable angle that managers and bosses can take with their people. It isn't about being nosy or wanting to know about what's going on in their life, but it is about knowing how the employee is doing. And I spoke at the beginning about understanding that this is a two-way street. Every element we're talking about today in empowerment comes from a place of understanding yourself, but also understanding who your audience are. And Umad has brought up a really important point. Umad says halftime is very important. I always make my employees take the full hour of lunch. And Umad, absolutely, this has got to come from the business, from the environment, from policies. There's got to be a culture of, I talk about it being a marathon, not a sprint. We're here, we're working more time than we're relaxing on a weekday anyway. So it's important that we get those times to replenish the vessel and to decompress from one thing and start focusing on the other. But if as managers, if as team leaders, if as more experienced people in an organization, we're not doing that, then how are more junior people who are learning their way going to follow? So there is a responsibility for senior members of an organization and leadership to encourage this. So Umad, well done you. And hopefully you're doing it for yourself as well. You know what they say, the oxygen mask, you put it on yourself first, because if we're okay, we will be able to notice when somebody else isn't okay, because we know what okay feels like.
Yeah.
But if we're so tightly wound up as managers, then chances are we're going to encourage unhealthy behavior that is bad for people's mental health. Mansi has just given us a comment. Mansi says, I just have a break for
one.
I have one break perhaps in the office according to the office policy, and it almost takes 40 to 45 minutes for lunch or dinner. Any suggestion for me? Okay, Mansi, I think what I understand you're saying is that you're only allowed to have half an hour lunch break, but that by the time you've had your food, taken the time out to make something, that it takes longer. Let me know if I'm on the right tracks. What I would say to that is, look, legally, if you work any more than 6 hours, you have to have a 20-minute break in that 6 hours. That is from a health and safety policy from the Working Time Directive. Nobody should be made to work without a break if you're doing a minimum of 6 hours.
Yeah, she just said yes.
Yes, okay. So it depends on how long you're working, whether that is legally allowed. If it's not even your legal allowance, then perhaps go back to your manager and say, look, I'd like to be considered for more time. You can often get great free advice with ACAS. That's private. Nobody needs to know you're making the phone call. You can give them your whole scenario, and you're free to give me a call as well. And I'd love to help you with that. But it would depend on what your start time and finish time is. So your hours are right, 12:30 to 10. It sounds like you may be entitled to more breaks. From looking at that is a 9.5 hour working. You should at least get an hour in that. Now, what I would suggest is that you look at your policies, you give ACAS a call, and maybe talk to your manager and say, look, is there any way that we can build, maybe get some information first, get some facts from ACAS, and then I would talk to your manager and try to work with them and say, love doing what I'm doing. Everything's going really well. However, my challenge is that I just don't have enough time to decompress and to go and, literally, have a break, have a bite to eat and come back. And I want to do well in my work. And this is then impacting me from being able to do well in my work. So I hope that's helpful. As I said, no one should feel that there isn't an option or a solution. And the best way to approach that is by starting the conversation. Definitely write down all your facts, write down and think about what your boss might say and think about what challenges they might face. Very often in a business, bosses don't want to say yes because they think, oh, if I say yes to you, I'm going to have to say yes to everyone else. But actually, that might be good for everyone. So it doesn't hurt. What you bring up might actually instigate, a whole evolution in the organization that everyone will benefit from.
Yeah. And actually that kind of, again, ties into our next point of how you can push back in a polite but constructive way. If you've got your facts and figures ready and can say why it benefits you, but why it will also benefit your manager or the company and other employees. And again, you're going to have a bit more of a easier conversation, I think, to have with someone. But like I was telling you again before, obviously I had someone who was told to watch their tone because I think once you get a nerve that's struck, you want to be able to stick up for yourself. But it's hard to do that sometimes then and know the line.
Well, we are certainly going to unpick that scenario in the next segment. But Inga makes a comment about building rapport. Inga says when you build rapport with people, you then know when someone really needs a moment. And you're so right, Inga. It's when you're connected and you are your colleagues, but you notice, how people are doing, and you have that rapport, that you can actually then also approach a lot of conversations. And it doesn't have to be peer-to-peer rapport. You can build rapport with your boss. Usually the rapport building is led by your boss, but it doesn't mean that you can't instigate more conversations. It doesn't mean that you can't try to evolve that relationship. It doesn't have to be a one-way street with your boss. And so when we're talking about pushing back in a polite and constructive way, Alaina, so you mentioned the scenario about someone that they almost had a problem that had been with them for a while, and what ended up happening was that whatever they were dealing with at that moment came loaded with the previous problems as well. So the reaction to a challenge on the ground actually was like a sledgehammer, when it might have needed a little tiny tap with a little hammer. And there's a phrase which I don't like using because I don't think it actually explains, but it's passive aggressive thing. It's actually when we're not talking about the challenges as they rise, and what we end up doing is banking all these emotions and challenges that eventually just want to come out. And then all of a sudden, maybe your boss says, "Can you stay late?" And that's it. You're like, I don't want to stay late. I'm never appreciated. And potentially you could end up saying something that puts you in a difficult position to even continue in your role. And you mentioned that this person in particular were asked to watch their tone. Well, we've already touched on the fact that tone is, nearly 40% of how we communicate. Body language, whether we're sitting or standing, whether we're leaning in or whether we're sitting back relaxed, whether we're using our hands a lot. I use my hands a lot when I speak. And sometimes I realize it's almost like I could almost be, sort of jumping in for a hug or a tussle. Sometimes how we physically speak as well is the body language is important. So what I would say about, well, first of all, deal with problems as they arise. I think if you are going to have to face difficult conversations coming at you. So this is the other way around, isn't it? This is how someone comes to you with a request or a demand, or says something to you, or we talked about people being yes people. You start a new job, you want to show earnest, you want to show willing, you want to show that you're motivated. You're like yes, yes, yes. Then all of a sudden, everything comes your way, and it's like, well, hold on, how did we get here? So when we think about how to push back in a polite and constructive way, I think first and foremost, it's almost planning for these scenarios before they happen. And so this is something that I think everyone, we should all have this tool of communicating, because communicating isn't just body language, or communication isn't just body language, tone and words. It's also listening. Listening is a form of communication. And when you encounter something coming to you which makes you feel uncomfortable or that you don't want to do, I think the first thing you've got to do is almost click into, right, I'm about to face that scenario where I don't want to do something. How am I going to deal with this? So it's almost like you become conscious of what's coming to you. And the first thing is listen without judgment. First and foremost, you may assume you know what's coming, but you may not know, right? So you could also say, you know what, whatever you're about to say, it's really important to me. Let me grab a notebook and pen. And that gives you just a minute to gather your thoughts and to just think, right, okay, I'm ready to listen. And if it's your boss saying stuff, say, listen, I want to write this down because I don't want to get anything wrong. Or I want to listen and understand, so I'm going to make some notes. Is that okay? And that will dispel that kind of something coming at you with full force, but it will just turn it into a conversation, or at least a more gentle paced encounter. And then it's again, it's whatever comes to you, whether it's a demand, whether it's a request, whether it's a comment or an observation. It's okay to say, I'd like to think about that. Can I come back to you on that? And when when you're dealing with a peer group scenario, that may feel like it's easier. When it comes from a senior person, you don't often think that you have the right to say that. So ask, say, I could respond now and I may not do the best work I can do for you, or I just need 10 or 15 minutes to reflect and then I can do an even better job. So in order for us to get the best outcomes from what you just said, having some time to reflect would really ensure a better outcome.
Yeah.
Umar actually comments that leadership seems to be an issue. The behaviors of your leaders determine and filter down to their direct reports. A company culture is built by positive employee-led approach. Yeah, you know what? I'm a real believer in for the people, by the people. You know, if an organization wants to have a culture, look at what you stand for as a business, not just what you do in the world, but what you do that's good for the world. You know, think about what your mission is. You know, and not all businesses have thought about these things, or they've thought about them and then they've forgotten about them and they've put them in the top drawer. But as employees, there should be scenarios and there should be opportunities to share ideas. It might be brainstorming sessions, it might be kickoff meetings, it might be conferences, it might be an anonymous box of comments that you can put things in. It might be asking your boss what they thought about this. You know, there are ways that you can start to bring in suggestions. What I'm hoping is that if you're a boss, come to our webinars more. If you're an employee, get your bosses to come to our webinars, because, you know, I agree, it's like any relationship, it's a two-way street, and we've got to be on the same page in terms of culture, behaviors, and where we want this journey to end, you know, and go towards, which is success and happiness. For me, you know, the working relationship is about success and happiness in equal measures. And, you know, if you've got somebody, a leader, who is difficult to work with, then it really is, you know, remember, you've got a choice. You do not have to face that. If you choose to face it, you've made that choice based on lots of factors. And remember, you are turning up to work empowered. And if you feel empowered, remember, you have a choice. A lot of the mental health challenges can start to be alleviated by remembering that. I would also say that if someone comes at you with a lot of negativity, have a think about what their story's been up to that point. You know, could they have had a bad day? Could they have, you know, something difficult happening in their personal life? Are they projecting? And also, I think it's, you know, really powerful thing is to be able to say sorry without saying sorry. I'm sorry you've experienced that. I'm sorry that's happened for you. I'm really sorry you feel that way. And sometimes just the language we use, again, dispels and dissipates this you versus them and brings you onto the same team. And when you've got a leader who may not be as good as at communicating as you, it can feel really upside down. But actually, sometimes your leader will notice that you're bringing a more collaborative way of working and speaking, and may even decide to embrace that. And remember, responsibility and fault are two very different things. So if somebody comes at you with a problem, let's reflect. Now, did I make a mistake? Or is this something that I have the responsibility of fixing? They're two very different things. And with any difficult conversation, I'm just looking at the time because we have gone already into the 45 minutes. Gosh, I'm so sorry, guys. We've been talking away, haven't we, Alaina? We'll be really quick on this because I think it is important. Remember that any difficult conversation or an accusation or a demand thrown at you can be reflected on. You can go back with a solution, and you can say, have you got a minute to discuss what you brought up, and go with a solution. And, you know, you can talk about, I take responsibility for this because it's in my job description, but if the taxi turned up late to pick you up, you know, I am going to make sure that doesn't happen again because it's my responsibility too. But I also don't drive the car. But you don't have to say it that way. By saying that I will make sure this doesn't happen again is usually enough. Yeah. You've taken responsibility, but it's not your fault. And it's two very different factors to think about. And also, as a boss, if you're dealing with people where mistakes have been made, let's think about, you know, what led to that. Let's not blame, let's look for solutions. Yeah. Uma talks about empathy-led management, which has to be positive, realistic around issues and addressing them with positive actions and points. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, empathy-led management, definitely. I think that's a book I'm reading at the moment. It touched on, the chapter I read today touched on how, again, humans, we crave kind of that sympathy. We want that whenever we can. And I think, like you were just saying about making sure that you can put yourself in someone's point of view and see what, or from either side, what might have affected their reaction to you and what might have affected your reaction to them, and all of that. I had a scenario even this weekend. My friend kind of complained to the waitress just about her kind of attitude and manner. She was quite rude at some point, but it obviously struck a nerve because she started saying, I've been in hospitality for 20 years. And she brought up the fact that she was a mum. And my friend was like, what did I do? And I said, the fact that she brought up she's a mum means that there is definitely personal life things going on. So just don't worry. Like, that wasn't on you. That was on that. Like, it hit a nerve. And you do have to just think about that sometimes and not take everything to heart.
Yeah. It doesn't make that comment, statement, approach okay, but it does allow you to understand where they're coming from, fix the problem, and then use one-to-ones to talk about, can we talk about what happened and how
and you get to the root of it instead.
So Alaina, isn't it ironic that as we're running out of time, we're going to tie up with and I want to just say to everyone that if you're okay, we'd love to just do 5 more minutes, just because, as you can see, this is so important. Even I have gone over time today. But time management, we talked about, how you start and finish your day, sort of really having definitive morning routines. Even if it's a commute to work, do something for yourself, whether you meditate, you walk your dog. I've got a dog now, whatever it is, especially if you're working from home, and vice versa. At the end of the day, some people go to the gym, some people go and meet family. You've all been so wonderful for sharing what your approaches are, that anyone who watches this afterwards will be really, empowered and will be able to, get more from these sessions. So thank you. And I'm getting some really nice feedback. Thank you so much. What I would say about time is get your bookends right, as Alaina called it. I'm a foodie, so I talked about it like a sandwich. I said in the middle, work is the filling, and the bread is your routine. So, and revisit it, because from experience, we get into the habit of things, it becomes subconscious, and then it starts to weaken. So really revisit your beginning and end of the day. And then there's a couple of things that I would say really help with time management. Plan to plan, make time to plan. So every day, if you can, set some time up to do your plan for the next day. And I've got these 4 Ds, which are really good. And actually, Alaina and I did this. Alaina's my business assistant, and we work together, and a lot flows through our world. And sometimes we can't see the wood for the trees, which can be very demotivating when we're feeling overwhelmed. But we broke down our approach into what we do, what we delegate, what we delete, what's not important, and actually what can be delayed till the next day. And the way that looks like for me is that I do a really long list, and then I just pick 3 to 5 things that I want to do on that day. So we've got a to-do list and a today list. Now imagine getting through your 3 to 5 things and thinking, I've got time to do more. Wow, I'm going to go to my to-do list and see what else there is. Versus, I've got 3 to 5 things done, but I've still got 20 other things to do. I didn't achieve anything. It's all mindset. And by giving yourself that moment of, oh, wow, I've achieved 5 things, you create an energy that wants to go and do more. Whereas if you look at it as, I know it's the half empty, half full scenario, but when you're looking at a to-do list, it's really powerful crossing things off. Things off. So go back to that really, basic list making. And even I use my calendar a lot. I put everything into my calendar, what I want to do, because often we think something's going to take 10 minutes when it actually takes 30. Build time to decompress from one responsibility to the next. You can't.
I know. I always love that you call them comfort breaks.
Yeah, because you're going to you can't be in 2 places at once, not only physically but mentally. You're going from one meeting to the next. You need time to switch off from that and then get into the zone of the next one. And sometimes that's a shift of, so my comfort break, my neutral is either the coffee or the comfort, a loo break. So but that's also like neutral space, which then neutralizes the brain and then allows you to have a blank canvas to go into whatever you're covering next. And then know yourself, because I was saying to Alaina, in sessions like this, as you all have noticed, I can talk and be engaged for a long time, but give me a writing task and I'm kind of fidgeting after about 10 minutes, in which case I put a timer on and I say, right, I'm going to go great guns for 10 minutes. Then I'm going to breathe and look at what's done, what I've done. And if it's only 10 minutes, you kind of put your all in and you've probably done enough already. Mm-hmm. And there's the Pomodoro method, isn't it? Is that how long? 20 minutes, isn't it?
It's and then the 5-minute break that you have as well for it. So you just set the timer, which is good. And I read one which I've started like trying to do myself about also setting up like a timetable at school, or if you look after certain different sectors. I guess it works for me because I have to split my day between admin, marketing, and business development.
Yeah.
And so obviously when I first was in it, it was kind of everything piled in. But now I make sure every day when I come in, I split my page up into its 3 sectors, and then I work off separate to-do lists almost. But instead of it looking like one giant overwhelming mess, I know then I have all the different things. And then like we've just done recently of putting it in priority, can, wait a little bit longer. And then next week actually is next problem. And that's a lot more reassuring for you as well, I think. And empowering, because then, like you said, you feel on top of it each time you tick off your thing that you've been working on for each one. And if you get, like for us, and we got through our entire priority list, we were like, okay, we can go again.
Yeah, we were elated. We actually had more energy than we probably had on any of the other days. So take time to plan. It really is powerful. And be kind to yourself in that space. Make that time to have breaks. And what I would say is when you've planned and someone comes up to you and says, can you just do this? It's really good to be able to say yes, but here's the 5 things that also need to be done today. If it's a manager, can you just help quickly reprioritize with me which one's most important? Or the other way around, if as a manager, sometimes you're constantly getting someone knocking at your door and saying, have you got a minute? Have you got a minute? Have you got a minute? And you say, I do, but then the day that I was planning for everyone might not happen. So shall we book some time in? It's really important that I give you my full attention. And if I couldn't do that now, so shall we set some time up? So there's always a way to make sure you can do right by yourself, right by your team, and right by your business. Right. Oh, Yvonne, thank you so much for your feedback. I'm touched by that. We started these webinars in a very difficult time, and all I wanted to do was to be able to share and support our network and community. So thank you. And we're going to carry on. We're going to have a summer hiatus, but we go through to middle of July now.
As well.
But next week is Jubilee. Thursday, don't forget, it's a bank holiday, so we won't be here next week. But after that, we're here every Thursday right through to the summer break, which is starting on the 21st. So we're here till the 14th of July. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone who's been on this webinar today and given us your comments, your thoughts, and also contributed to the poll. I'm going to publish those poll results now, which have pretty much stayed where they were when we discussed them. Yeah. And Alaina, a really big thanks to you. You not only are great to work with, but you also have such a strong belief in mental health and the power of self-care. So thank you for making that a priority, because it helps me make it a priority as well.
Yes, of course. I will keep it all on track.
Wonderful.
And Manzi said she'd want to attend more webinars. So Manzi, make sure then that you'll be on our list now if you want to be, but we have our Instagram and LinkedIn. So if you're following us on both of them, then we always announce them on there.
And we'll invite you along.
Yeah, we'll always be there too.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye for now and see you soon.
Bye.